I am Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Welcome to Trump Watch. There's at least one good thing coming out of this disaster of Donald Trump's war against Iran and the Iranian people. He has announced a withdrawal of 5,000 troops from Germany in retaliation, apparently, for the German government's refusal to come to his assistance with his war in Iran, and even worse, criticizing that intervention. Why is this a good thing? Well, what are troops doing in Germany in the first place? Why not bring them all home? How many are there? Tens of thousands, 80,000 or something like that? What are they there for? It all goes back to this whole Cold War racket that the national security establishment got going after World War II to justify the conversion of the U.S. government to a national security state. That's a totalitarian form of governmental structure. I've pointed this out for many, many years now. A national security state is not what our ancestors brought into existence with the Constitution. They brought into existence a governmental structure called a limited government republic. What does that mean? It means a very minimal government that is minimal in the sense that its powers are extremely limited to the few powers that are enumerated in the document. That was one of the conditions. That after the Constitutional Convention, which was supposed to be just to modify the Articles of Confederation, a different type of governmental system that had existed for 10 or 11 years after the Declaration of Independence. But instead they came out with this new form of governmental structure, proposing it to the American people. And they said one of the conditions is this new government will be limited to the very few powers that are enumerated in the document. And then, of course, the American people were very leery, and they said, well, we want a Bill of Rights on top of that. They wanted the Constitution to be amended immediately to clarify that the government wouldn't have the power to destroy freedom of speech, freedom of religion, gun rights, and that if they wanted to target somebody with incarceration or punishment, they'd have to go through due process of law, trial by jury, and other procedural protections. In other words, they didn't trust this federal government like Americans today do. They didn't have any trust at all. And the last thing they would have ever approved was a national security state form of governmental structure. The governmental structure that Americans today love, they adore. It's like their God. The Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA. Oh, Jacob, national security, national security. The national security state exists to protect our national security. Well, to justify this conversion to this totalitarian type system, and it is totalitarian like because it wields omnipotent powers. It has the power to kill people, including Americans. And, we call it assassination, but it's murder. Like when they're killing those people in the high seas, those suspected drug dealers haven't been formally charged with drug dealing. They haven't been convicted of drug dealing. Never mind that drug dealing isn't even a death penalty offense under U.S. law. Just kill them, assassinate them. And with impunity. They don't have to worry about getting indicted or anything. That's just what I mean about omnipotent government. Total, powerful government. And they can kill Americans too. So we don't even know. Maybe some of those vote people were Americans. It doesn't matter. Americans, foreigners. This is the type of governmental structure we live under. A power of full, omnipotent power of assassination. They can assassinate U.S. presidents, congressmen, whatever. Nothing's going to happen to them. Or if they assassinate some general in a foreign country or some president of a foreign country, nothing's going to happen to them. Because they have that power under a national security state. Same with torture. They want to take Americans into custody and torture them. That power. This is what a national security state's all about. Americans would never have approved the Constitution, not in a million years, if you had told them that the Constitution was bringing into existence a national security state. And so the conversion takes place, and to justify it so people can feel okay about this massive conversion without even a constitutional amendment. You see, our system is set up so that if you want to change the system, you've got to get a constitutional amendment to change the system. We saw this like with prohibition. In order to get prohibition of alcohol into law, you had to get a constitutional amendment. To repeal it, you needed a constitutional amendment. They didn't get a constitutional amendment to convert the entire government to a national security state. But to justify this, they had this racket called the Cold War. And it was all, based on the notion of, that Reds are coming to get us, the communists are coming to get us. And principally, the idea was that there was this big communist conspiracy to take over the world, an international communist conspiracy. They make fun of people with conspiracy theories. This was their conspiracy theory, that there was this worldwide international communist conspiracy to take over the world. And it was based in Moscow, Moscow, Russia. Okay. So in order to protect us from this international communist conspiracy, we needed to change the entire governmental system to this totalitarian system, which was based on the same principles as the Soviet Union, Russia, China. To protect us from the Red threat, we had to become like the Reds in terms of our governmental structure. And the Reds were everywhere. The Reds were in North Korea. The Reds were in Vietnam, or North Vietnam, and they were here at home in the United States. They were in the Army, they said. They were in the Congress, the halls of the bureaucracies. Some of the right-wingers were even saying that the White House had Reds. In Hollywood, I mean, that was what the whole Red Scare of Hollywood was about, indicting Dalton Trumbo and Hollywood writers and trying to destroy them. And, later communist Cuba and Guatemala, don't forget that, Iran, 1953. The Reds were everywhere. So they had to have this notion that the Soviet Reds were coming. And so this is what the Europe part of this racket was all about. The whole NATO thing. The Soviets are going to attack Western Europe, which was nonsense. The Soviet Union had been destroyed, absolutely destroyed by the Nazi armies. I mean, their whole industrial base, they almost got conquered. I mean, the Nazi Germany almost defeated them. It was because of the Russian winter that the German invasion faltered. And so the Soviets were able to turn it around, but barely. And so they come back, and in order to get to Berlin, they took over, they invade through Eastern Europe. And then Roosevelt essentially gives them Eastern Europe. Says, okay, after the war, you guys can have this as part of your booty. And so at the end of the war, Americans said, we won. But who really won? The United States. What? We got a national security state out of it. We got a Cold War out of it. We got Korean War out of it. Vietnam War out of it. What did we get out of this win? The British? Are you kidding? They lost their whole empire, which is really a good thing. Empires are not good things. But from their perspective, it wasn't a good thing. They were the biggest, most powerful empire in the world. They lost their empire. And so who ends up controlling Eastern Europe? The Soviets do. For, almost 50 years. They've got their people there to serve as a buffer so that in case Germany decides to do this again with a World War III, they've got to cross these buffer zones. And so from their sense, it was logical of maintaining control over Eastern Europe. But the racket was, this proves, because they took control over what Roosevelt had given them, and they've got their little lackeys in there running these countries. This proves that they're going to invade Western Europe, which was ridiculous. Their whole nation was devastated. The last thing they wanted was another war. And especially since they knew the United States would come to the assistance of France and Great Britain, and the United States was the only one that had nuclear weapons. Remember that. And the United States had shown a willingness to use them against populated cities, like Moscow or St. Petersburg. The last thing they were going to do was start a war with the only nuclear power in the world. Not to mention the fact that their whole nation was devastated. But a national security state needs crises. They need official enemies. They need to get people all riled up. And so the notion was, okay, to the American people, okay, we've defeated Nazi Germany. Congratulations. Thanks for sticking with us. And despite the fact that you guys didn't want to get into the war, like I think it was like 90% of the American people didn't want to get into World War II after the horrific disaster of World War One. But Roosevelt had figured out a way to provoke the Japanese into attacking at Pearl Harbor with his oil embargo. Sound familiar? Antics, and Japan had that noose tied around their neck, much as Iran does now, and decided to try to knock out the Pacific Fleet. And so Roosevelt got what he wanted. He got into World War II. So here, the irony is the Soviet Union, which had served as America's ally in World War II, is now the official enemy. And they need official enemies. They need crises, constant crises. Why do you think we've lived all of our lives under perpetual war and perpetual crises? Because then people say, oh, Jacob, we need a national security state. We need a national security. We need the CIA, Jacob. Who's going to do intelligence, surveillance? And, oh my gosh, Jacob, we need the Patriot Act. We need the giant military establishment and bases in 700, 800 countries around the world. We need our empire. And, well, yeah, because they're over there stirring all this stuff up in order to justify their existence. And so you've got these troops in Germany still occupying Germany. I don't know, 80,000 or something like that. He's bringing out 5,000. Big deal. Why not bring them all home? World War II ended a long time ago. And of course, the Germans are doing kind of like nonchalant about this, but they're like kind of freaking out because, hey, those 5,000 troops spend money over here, and helps us out. But they're still conjuring up this image of Russia's. Oh, they're going to come and get us. The Russians are going to come and get us. The Russians can't even defeat Ukraine. If they can't defeat Ukraine, how are they going to defeat Western Europe? And not only that, but you see, they say, oh, well, the fact they invaded Ukraine shows you that they want to invade Western Europe. Really? That's ridiculous. The reason they invaded Ukraine was because NATO, the Pentagon runs NATO, provoked them into doing it because the Pentagon needs these constant crises. Remember at the end of the Cold War when everything was going in a very nice direction, the peaceful coexistence with Russia, friendly relations, same with China. It was really what John Kennedy was aiming for before they assassinated him. Just peaceful coexistence in the world, mutual trading, whatever. You may have a different ideology, that's your business, whatever. But a national security state cannot tolerate that type of thing. They need crises. And so they use NATO to start absorbing Eastern European countries, vetoing what the diplomats had done in the State Department. In the White House, they had promised that NATO would never expand eastward because they knew what the Russians' attitude was. That, hey, we don't want German troops on our borders, We've gone through this before. And Germany's part of NATO, of course. And they know the aggressiveness of the U.S. government. They know the Pentagon and the aggression against Cuba that the Pentagon and the CIA have long initiated. And other nations. This is a very aggressive power. Martin Luther King pointed out the U.S. government is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. And so here you've got this veto by the Pentagon that says, no, NATO's going to start expanding eastward with the notion that this is going to rile up the Russians because they're going to see all these troops, including German troops and nuclear missiles on their border. And they're going to react, which they said they would, decade after decade. They said, you keep doing this, we're going to invade Ukraine to stop this from going on. And so when they finally did, they lost the war in Afghanistan, the U.S. had, and they needed to distract attention from that. They didn't want Americans to start asking questions about what was that all about. They needed a new crisis. And so they don't have another 9/11 to get everybody all upset about, so they generate this new crisis. Oh, Russia's coming to get us. Russia's coming to get us when they invade Ukraine. Well, as we can see, the Russians can't even defeat Ukraine, but they're still bringing up this notion, oh, we've got to have these tens of thousands of troops in Europe and Great Britain and Germany and whatever to protect against the Russian threat. The Russians. It's always the Russians. The Russians are coming again. And to a certain extent, it's the the Chinese too. But it's all a big racket. It's a racket, and this is what Americans just cannot confront, that their system of government is a racket. And I'm referring to a national security state system of government. It's just one great big racket. And as long as you leave this system in place, a national security state, instead of restoring a limited government republic, you're going to have perpetual war for perpetual peace. There's always going to be war. War on terrorism, war on Muslims, war on communism, war on illegal immigrants, war on drug dealers, war on this, war on that, war on poverty. You're always going to have it because the national security state depends on it, on perpetual war. So it's just one great big racket, But it's good. At least they're pulling 5,000 troops out of there. Yeah, there's some people freaking out. Oh my gosh! Oh, the Russians are going to take over. It's ridiculous. Bring all the troops home. I mean, this notion of America as an empire has just been a disaster, with troops all over the world, policing the world. And then now we've got this thing in Iran. So, one of the interesting things was there was a Wall Street Journal editorial recently on this thing about Trump needs to stay the course. They said that he shouldn't taco out. And what they're referring to is the blockade. Trump's blockade and the Pentagon's blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. And they are the ones that are now causing worldwide damage. And as I've pointed out, the devastation is unbelievable. But especially for the people in Iran. I mean, think about the fact that they've had sanctions on the Iranian people, which I've been critical of for decades. It's horrible to target the population of a regime, of a country, to get at the regime. It's evil. And so they were devastated. So I knew what the result of that military battle was. The war was going to be if the U.S. ever attacked. The mainstream press, oh my gosh, this could be a real big disaster, a war, Iran could win, and all this. I constantly said this is going to be a cakewalk. It's just a cakewalk. It's like invading Cuba or something. It's a third world country invading Grenada, invading Venezuela or whatever. These are third world countries, and this is a country that had been hollowed out by sanctions. They were desperately poor. A government depends on the tax revenues of the citizenry. When you're impoverishing that citizenry, that base, that means less tax revenues, which means the government can't have a big, powerful military and so forth. So it was a cakewalk. I mean, Trump's right, he won. He destroyed their Navy in one day and their Air Force in one day. I don't know about their Army because I don't know how many soldiers were sitting in those military facilities that they were bombing. I mean, if they were smart, they would have just told all the soldiers, stay at home and we'll call you when we need you in case there's like an invasion. But in terms of military victories, it was a cakewalk. Okay, so why didn't Trump come home then? He said he was going to come home. He says, I won. I wanted it. They bombed their nuclear facilities, and he keeps saying, oh, we stopped them from getting a nuclear bomb. Well, okay, well, then come on home. But he can't. It's a tar baby. It's a tar baby. He's got his hands in the tar, and he can't let go. Remember when he said, we're going to invade the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to take it over. We're going to bomb their oil facilities. We're going to bomb into the Stone Age and all this. But none of that. None of that's taking place. Now, he's still threatening to do that. But there's a ceasefire, which I put ceasefire in quotation marks. A blockade is not a ceasefire. The Iranians are right about this point. It's an act of war. And they shot at an Iranian vessel because the blockades any ship that stops in Iran. What they're trying to do is the Venezuelan thing and the Cuban thing. They're trying to use the blockade. So they reverse directions. Remember, at first they were like, oh my gosh, we didn't realize that the Iranians would do this, put a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz and just let their ships go through. And they were like shocked. So, the price of gas is soaring. And so, their first reaction was panic. Oh, we'll let all the Iranian ships go through. So lift the sanctions on Iran. What? We're at war with Iran. Yeah, but we need the oil. So let the Iranian ships go through and everything will be okay, and lift sanctions on Russia too, which is great. I mean, it should be lifting sanctions on everybody because, like I said, they're evil. But then they started thinking about it. Well, where is this going to get us? And here's the tar baby. Oh, well, let's change directions. Let's do our own blockade in order to starve the Iranian people and to kill them by death by starvation, where they can't get any revenues. It's like the Venezuelan model. That was why Venezuela capitulated. They were on the verge of national societal disaster, death by starvation, by illness, unable to survive. I mean, we've seen it periods of time in history. The Romans would do this when they'd have these sieges. The Roman Empire have these sieges around these castles where people would be recalcitrant, say, we're not going to become your serfs, and they just would stop letting food and water into the they wouldn't attack. They just surround it and not let food and water in, and finally they'd have to capitulate, surrender. Except there was one city composed mostly of Jews, as I recall, that they went in there and they'd all dead. They chose death over being enslaved. And while we're on the subject of slavery, there's an interesting thing about slavery. I learned this from the founder of the Foundation for Economic Education, Leonard Reed. Leonard said that when you're holding a person down, okay, you're holding him down. I mean, he can't get up. Okay, he's there, but you are as enslaved as he is, because you can't get up either. Because if you get up, he's going to get up, and your objective is to keep him down. So you can't leave. You're there forever because you got to keep him down, and that's what's going on with this tar baby right now. That Trump can't stand the thought that if he leaves them alone because he didn't get regime change, they're going to stand up again. So he said, I can't do that. WMDs. And even though all the U.S. intelligence agencies said they weren't trying to get a WMD. They weren't even close to getting a WMD. But you know, U.S. presidents know what WMDs do to the American people. So they scare the dickens out of them. And so all you got to do is say, WMD, and everybody freaks out. Like Saddam Hussein, remember? Saddam Hussein's coming with his WMDs, mushroom clouds, and they had pictures of mushroom clouds, and they had charts in Congress. Colin Powell, a general, had his charts and WMDs, and so everybody says, oh. And when you said, but when you point out what the international inspectors said, there's no WMDs. Oh, those hapless inspectors. I remember I had a friend who worked in the national security establishment, the defense industry. And he said, oh, those hapless Clouseau type, Inspector Clouseau type inspectors, they don't know what they're doing. They're incompetent. Wait till the U.S. military gets in there. And then the U.S. military got in there and said, well, there's no WMDs after all. And so, you know, we see this now. I mean, the Ayatollah was going to strike us with his WMDs. It's all bull. It's all just part of the racket. But you know, it's very effective because people say, oh, Jacob, Donald Trump has information that we don't have access to, which is kind of hard to believe since all the intelligence agencies said they weren't even trying to get a nuclear bomb. But that's the only thing they can hang their hat on. They might get a nuclear bomb. So what does Trump do now? I mean, he's holding them down because if he doesn't, they might get a nuclear bomb. And they have incentive now because they know that the U.S. doesn't attack countries with nuclear bombs like North Korea. So he has to stay there. And look at the U.S. Navy. The Navy's tied down there with this embargo. So it's like a race against time now. Can we starve them to death, the population, into submission before too long? And especially before the midterms. Can we get them to capitulate? And Trump has to get a better deal than what Biden did. See, Biden had struck a deal with the Iranians where they had inspectors making sure they weren't producing nuclear bombs. They hadn't lifted the sanctions. That's what they should have done. But in any event, Trump broke that deal. Says, I can get a better deal. So, I mean, when you enter into an agreement with people, even a country, you ought to stick with it as far as I'm concerned. But Trump said, I don't need to stick with it. I didn't make the deals. But he is now under the burden of producing a better agreement than Biden, because otherwise What's he got to show? But so it's a race against time here. He's trying to starve the Iranian people into death by starvation so that their regime capitulates before the Iranian part of this blockade, because they're blocking non-Iranian ships. The U.S. is blocking Iranian ships, so it's a total blockade. And they're trying to cause economic damage across the world, which is evil. So it's like, who's going to give in first? But who's paying the price for this? The Iranian people and the people of the world, including the American people. These two regimes. And the assumption is, oh, well, because they're evil, they're doing something evil, that converts our regime into doing something good. No. You can have evil battling evil, which is exactly what you have here. Now, you've got an evil system of sanctions with an evil blockade, an evil war of aggression, undeclared war, illegal under our form of government. And Trump does this on his own. You have no doubt with the support and approval, maybe even the authorization of the Pentagon, the CIA, the NSA, the National Security State. But the Wall Street Journal has this op-ed where this editorial where they say, well, we've got to stay the course, Mr. President. Got to stay the course with this blockade. We got to win, because they say this is America's war now. Really? Why is it America's war? I mean, here's a guy that starts the war on his own. He doesn't go to Congress and get a declaration of war. He doesn't even consult with Congress. Doesn't even advise Congress. So he doesn't need to. He said, I'm going to start this war on my own. And it's going to be over in 3 weeks. Boom, we just go and bomb them, destroy them. They capitulate like Venezuela, and it's over. But it's not over. But now, this is supposed to be our war. The American people are somehow under some moral obligation? I don't think so. It's our obligation to stand against evil things like this. And the best thing they can do at this point, that Trump can do, is not bring just the troops out of Germany. Bring them home from Iran. Leave it alone. They've not done enough damage. They've killed enough people there. They've caused enough destruction of this country. Enough's enough. And now they're dead set on causing more destruction, not only in Iran, but around the world. There's another option here. Stop destroying. Bring all the troops home, not just from Germany, not the rest of the world, but from Iran, from the Middle East. Bring them home, all of them home. But they can't, because it's a tar baby. As you're holding somebody down, you can't get up yourself. Trump's there. And now, one of the good things is that it distracts him. He can't do a lot of bad things to us here at home. Notice that his war on immigrants seems like it's still there. You got the whole police state there, but it has sort of like died down. They're not killing American protesters because they're not doing, at least openly and publicly, the kidnappings with the masked people, the stopping people on the streets or outside Home Depot or whatever. You don't see a lot of that going on because he's distracted. You don't see him invading Cuba, which, in my opinion, he wants to do. But he can't because he's tied down. The tar baby has him. He knows that if he gets up, they get up too. So he's there. And so the U.S. Navy is stuck there. Okay. How long will this embargo go on? Well, if it goes on for any length of time, the Navy's got to stay there. They can't leave. The tar baby has them, which may be a good thing because it means that they're not going to be, using their guns to kill people in the Caribbean. Well, I guess they're still killing people, but I imagine that they're not killing as many people with the Navy now over there tied down with this tar baby. So let me see. Let me look at my notes here and see if I've missed anything. I think that's pretty much got it. I was going to talk a little bit about the indictments that they're issuing out of the Justice Department, but that can wait. That's this week's Trump Watch. Thank you all for tuning in, and thanks as always for your great support of the Future of Freedom Foundation.